Good morning, everyone. I am Montgomery County Council President Gabe Albornoz, and today is Tuesday, October 18th, and we commence today's full County Council agenda with two important presentations. The first is a proclamation recognizing the 25th anniversary of the Office of the Inspector General by Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President Albornoz. Will also be joined by my colleague on the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, Councilmember Katz. We're here as a quorum of the GO Committee as well on behalf of Nancy Navarro as well. And we're just really excited to be here to not just celebrate the Inspector General herself and her team, but the entire history of this office and the oversight that it has provided for Montgomery County residents. We talk about a legislative branch, and our main job is to pass a budget and to provide oversight for that budget. And we talk a lot on the GO Committee about how our only currency in public life is public trust. And public trust starts with really understanding and making sure that we have the type of oversight that we need to make sure that taxpayers can feel confident that dollars are being spent in an effective way, in an efficient way, in a responsible and appropriate way. And every day, that's what the Inspector General and her team are doing, and we really appreciate it. For the past 25 years, they've been doing it. So we're joined here by somebody who is no stranger to this room and this body. Megan Davy Lamarzi was appointed Inspector General of Montgomery County in September of 2019. And then in 2021, she was unanimously reappointed. She has stepped into this job and this role, and her team together have been there at a time when it is perhaps needed more than ever, where there is a massive infusion of additional dollars, particularly from the federal level, where government was being asked to move at speeds that it has not been asked to move at before, where we have to make sure that this infusion of capital and these new roles and responsibilities that the county government is taking on are being handled in the most appropriate possible way. Ms. Lamarzi served as clerk of this body and Inspector General for the Maryland Department of Health, where she was the first female and youngest Inspector General at the Maryland Department of Health. She began her career as a criminal prosecutor and worked on both the state and local levels. And as an assistant attorney general, she focused on large-scale economic crimes, healthcare fraud, and public corruption cases. Ms. Lamarzi received her Juris Doctorate from University of Maryland School of Law and her Bachelor of Arts from where else? The University of Maryland College Park. Go Terps! She's a member of the Maryland Bar, a certified Inspector General, a recipient of the Daily Record's Leading Women Award, and a member of Leadership Montgomery's core class of 2019. She has developed a reputation for having a direct communication style, for being open, for being transparent, for fostering relationships within and beyond county government in order to do her job effectively. And in this role and under her leadership, the Office of Inspector General has seen a 145% year-over-year increase in complaints received, issued 45 reports, made 119 recommendations, and reviewed programs valued at over $500 million. During her tenure, the Office of Inspector General's annual operating budget has more than doubled with the strong support and advocacy of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. Her staff has grown from 5 full-time employees to 17, most of which, I think all of which, are here today. And she's increased the OIG's language and cultural competency capabilities and diversity, incorporated diversity, equity, and inclusion principles in all of her engagements. And she has really been a leader for county government throughout the state and around the region. As we looked to really strengthen this office at this critical time, we turned to Ms. Lamarzi, who has stepped up in ways that we had high hopes, and she's exceeded those high hopes and expectations as well. So congratulations and welcome. Thank you for all that you do every day to ensure public trust in the process among our public. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Friedson. I don't know that the staff could get any further back. I mean, my gosh, this is just like every religious place. Everybody could come down here. You know, it's hard to believe. And first off, I should have learned years ago never to let Andrew Friedson speak first. He has said everything that could possibly be said plus. Having said that, it is hard to believe that Montgomery County did not have an inspector general until 1997. I mean, Montgomery County, which is, I believe, larger than population-wise of 6 states in America. I mean, we're that large that we would not have had this type of oversight. And someone who's from outside of government, when they hear the term inspector general, I was teasing Megan before, you know, you think it's some sort of military rank, but when someone here, not everyone is aware of what an inspector general does. I can tell you, this lady standing right here is aware of what an inspector general does, and the people who are so far back in this room understand what an inspector general does. And we are so very fortunate to have someone in this position, and we've had them all along, but especially now, to do the work and to do it in such a fair way. You all call balls and strikes. You don't come in and have an agenda to figure out, you know, to do gotchas. You come in to figure out what's a better way for government to perform. So with that, we publicly thank all of you for doing a great job for all of us during, as Councilmember Friedson said, during some times where every now and then all of us have to shake our head and go, really? How did that happen? But anyhow, once you get that really, how did it happen? You then have to have that next head shake and say, we've got to solve it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Megan, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Katz, Councilmember Friedson, the entire council for this recognition of our 25th anniversary. Offices of Inspector General really fulfill a critical role in maintaining the democracy that we all enjoy in this country. Oh, thank you. OIGs foster transparency and accountability in government. We shine a light on the way government programs work to ensure that they are cost efficient and effective. We provide the necessary oversight that is needed to build public trust in our institutions. And we serve as a voice and a resource to county employees and residents, the whistleblowers who call us, who want to make sure things are done in a fair manner, who want things to be equitable, to be done right, and that really is our highest calling. So it is a great pleasure for all of us, and my entire team is here, and I am very grateful to them because the work that we put out is not possible without them and their efforts. And I'm very, very proud to lead this office into our next quarter century and continue serving the residents of Montgomery County.
Appreciate that. I'll just note the teams in the back row, that's the investigator seats. So you always stand. So everything's in front of you.
The county executive also back there.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, our committee saw a need in the Office of Inspector General to really provide additional resources to ensure the ultimate levels of independence, transparency, and accountability that the office would need, that any Office of Inspector General needs. And I think that we have been able to work together to make that happen, and you all have executed in a way that has really made us proud and that we deeply appreciate. So I'm really happy to be here with my colleague on that committee to be able to read this proclamation. So we have a proclamation from the Montgomery County Council. Whereas on October of 1997, the Montgomery County Council passed Bill 3896, amending the Montgomery County Code Chapter 2, Administration, Section 264A. I read the whole thing because I know the OIG staff would expect me to. Establishing an Office of the Inspector General as an independent office in the legislative branch of Montgomery County government. And
First off, were you even born in 1997? Whereas the Office of the Inspector General reviews the effectiveness and efficiency of programs and operations within county government and independent county agencies, and this has gotten a little confusing, I think, for some people. Independent county agency prevents and detects fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement in government activities and proposes ways to increase legal, fiscal, and ethical accountability of county government departments and county-funded agencies, and
whereas the Inspector General has authority over county government, the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County, Montgomery College, Montgomery County Board of Education, and Montgomery County Public Schools, and
whereas the Office of Inspector General investigates complaints from residents, contractors, and employees regarding suspected fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement in county-funded departments and agencies, and
whereas the Inspector General makes dozens of findings and recommendations each year to improve operations and services provided through publicly funded programs and agencies. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby celebrates the 25th anniversary of the Montgomery County Office of the Inspector General. And be it further resolved that the County Council recognizes the Montgomery County Office of the Inspector General for providing objective oversight, protecting the integrity of county government operations and programs, and proactively and thoroughly identifying potential sources of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement of county resources and public taxpayer funds. Presented on this 18th day of October in the year 2022 by myself, the Council President, Councilmember Katz, on behalf of all of our colleagues on the County Council. Congratulations, and I will note, when this office was created, I was running for treasurer of the student government of Hoover Middle School. Wow. So I was born, but I was pretty young. So congratulations, and here's to the next 25 years. I'd like to welcome up the whole staff. We're going to take a picture. So everybody on the team, come on down.
colleagues, please join us, please.
All right, thank you so much. Our next presentation will be a proclamation recognizing National Disability Employment Awareness Month, presented by myself and the County Executive. I'd like to welcome everybody who's here for that proclamation to please come forward. Yeah, you got it. All right, well, once again, good morning, everyone. It is such a privilege to have the opportunity to recognize National Disability Employment Month. We have some outstanding community-based organizations and nonprofit organizations, and a Department of Health and Human Services that is fully committed to ensuring that we facilitate the opportunity for every resident in Montgomery County to be able to access employment. We have record levels of openings right now within not just our county, but across this country. And it is critically important that we close the disability inclusion gap by merging disability into business opportunities, which at this time, again, is critical in all sectors. 90% of companies say they prioritize diversity and inclusion, yet only 40% consider disability in their work. We have to ensure that we embrace a movement nationally and take full advantage of the skill sets of every single one of our residents and the assets that they provide all of us for so many different reasons. And so I am honored to have the opportunity to present this proclamation this morning, and I will now turn it over to the county executive to say a few words as well.
So thank you, and I'm really happy to be here this morning. This is actually personally important to me. I have a foster son. He's 55 years old. He still lives with me. He's Down syndrome. And through most of his adult life, at times he's had community work through programs that will actually hire folks with disabilities. And I can tell you from his perspective, it's not the money. It's the sense of self-worth that comes from being able to go out and work. When he's not working, he talks about, can I get a job? Can I get a job? And he's not looking for the money. He has no idea what his paycheck is. But what he does know is that he's valued and he goes to work. And that's important for everybody to feel like they have a useful role to play. So that's my personal link to this. But I want to say that, I have a few people I want to thank for being here. We have Sherry Beamer and Garrett Alston of SEEK, Lou Merrick and Susan Hold from the Ivy Mount School. We've done a lot of work with the Ivy Mount School before. We have Patricia Ritter of the Treatment and Learning Center, Tom Liniak from JSSA for Compassionate Care, and Deschamps from Transcend, Tony Cancilosi from Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, and Cynthia Grissom from WorkSource Montgomery. And without all of you, we don't have the programs. And if I missed somebody, I'm sorry they weren't on this list. But it shows what's happening in Montgomery County. And I wanted to also add that Montgomery County has had a pretty aggressive program. This year, we're going to be allocating $175,000 in grant money to help Easter Seals on their mission. The Edison program helps many people with disabilities, and groups like Easter Seals just don't put their clients into the workforce once they've secured paycheck and benefits and retention support to make sure they could stay at work. And there's a Ticket to Work program run by the federal government, and I want to thank Montgomery County businesses for the role they play in employing. Like you said, not enough employment out there, lots of support. We need more employment opportunities. And at a point when there's so many vacancies in the private sector, this ought to be the time that people who are willing to work and want to work should be allowed to step up and fill these positions. So there's no better time than now for people to say this is the time to open our doors. You got people who want to work in a time when they're talking about all the people who don't want to work. We should be hiring the people who want to work. So I'm encouraged that we're doing this today, and thank you for always supporting this, and thank the council for always supporting this. This is another one of the things for which there's always been unanimous support for the work that this community does. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. County Executive. Just a couple of other recognitions. I wanted to recognize Patricia Galilee, the new chair of the Commission for People with Disabilities, and really want to thank her for her leadership. And I now want to invite Tony Cancilosi, the CEO of Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, to provide some remarks.
Good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you.
Obviously, hello, I am not Tony Cancilosi. I'm Jocelyn Hunter, Senior Director of Communications at Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, and I'm standing in this morning for Tony. He extends his regrets. He is unable to participate this morning. On behalf of Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, we extend sincere appreciation to the leadership of Montgomery County. Mr. Ehrlich, we thank you. Sir Gabe Albanaz, we thank you. And the County Council for your enduring commitment of our mission to serve people who are blind, visually impaired, and deafblind. Specifically with regards to National Disability Employment Awareness Month, we are so happy to share that Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind currently employs 72 individuals. Majority of those individuals are visually impaired or blind. So we truly live out our mission of serving people of all disabilities of vision loss so that they can remain active, productive, and independent in our community. And we are also very appreciative to Montgomery County for the recent contribution of the contract for 5 years of services for the county, Montgomery County, in order to provide critical independent living skills services, such as orientation and mobility, to teach those skills necessary for employment. Those are the bedrock of skills so that our community has the ability and the confidence to get from their home to their place of employment and to be very productive and contributors to our community at large. So we thank you very much, and we look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you. Well said. Joni would be proud. We will now read the proclamation. Whereas, Patricia. Yes, of course.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us here today. The commission is always proud to work with the county council and the county executive to push forward initiatives for persons with disabilities, especially around employment. The pandemic has taught us many lessons, and one of those lessons that we learned is that we can approach work differently. Telework, options for having, more time at home. Transportation is always the number one barrier to persons with disabilities. So being able to work at home, work differently, is an opportunity that I think we need to capitalize on. And we need to take those positive things from the pandemic and really look forward to a future where everybody has the opportunity to work, whether they work at home or they work in an office, which is my preference anyway, or they work with a service animal. So we are just so happy to work with you, and we'll continue to find ways to partner and to get more people working at the county as well as in the local community who have disabilities. So thank you so much.
Very, very well said. All right. Whereas Montgomery County's theme for National Disability Employment Awareness Month this year is disability part of the equity equation. We celebrate the many and varied contributions that people who have an intellectual, developmental, psychiatric, sensory, or physical disability bring to the workplace. And
whereas Montgomery County partners with public and nonprofit organizations and private businesses in innovative ways to address the high unemployment rates of individuals with disabilities by providing more inclusive career development and training programs. These efforts lead to increased levels of competitive integrated employment and dignity of meaningful work. And
whereas Montgomery County government strives to be a model for local jurisdictions and private sector employers, as evidenced by the county's hiring preference for veterans and people with disabilities. These preferences include veterans with service-related disabilities, departmental AP 110 employment contracts, LEAP 4 MCG, Project Search, WorkSource Montgomery, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, and our many contractual partnerships with nonprofit organizations. And Mr. County Executive, take us home.
all right. Whereas Montgomery County celebrates employers who promote workplace access for individuals with disabilities as a critical part of their commitment to diversity, inclusion, equity, and social justice in the workplace. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Mark Elrich as County Executive and Gabe Albornoz as Council President hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month in Montgomery County. We recommend this observance in all our residents and urge employers to hire, retain, and advance qualified employees who have a disability. Signed the 18th day of October 2022.
All right, congratulations. Let's take a picture. Colleagues, if you want to come down. sure we see everybody. Come up front. Come up front.
People know how important it is to have.
All right, we are a couple minutes ahead of schedule. Let's break for 5 minutes and then come back. get a countdown?
Good morning, we are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, good morning, everyone. We continue our council agenda today with general business. Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda changes or announcements?
Good morning, Council President, Council Vice President, Council members. We have a few brief announcements this morning. The County Council will be filling temporary Montgomery County Planning Board positions. Qualified parties must apply to the Council no later than October 18th at 5 p.m. The Council is scheduled to interview the temporary members on October 25th, 2022. On the consent calendar, item 6, we've added F, introduction, authorization of optional method of condemnation of land, Clarksburg Road at Snowden Farm Parkway, CIP project number 508000. The council did not receive petitions this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There are no minutes for approval this morning, so we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a work session on the 2022 through 2031 10-year comprehensive water supply and sewage systems plan. I want to thank Mr. Levchenko for running point on this for us, and we'll turn it over to him to tee up this important subject.
All right. Just some brief background on the 10-year plan for the council. The state requires that that jurisdictions periodically comprehensively review their 10-year plans. So this is meeting that requirement. We do amendments, we do category changes frequently, but this is a comprehensive review and update. And I've noted in the packet, the purpose of the plan and some of the major elements. I think what I want to focus on today is some of the major issues. We have the benefit of having had the executive transmit his draft recommended 2022 to 2031 plan. So we work from that as a baseline, but the council can and has brought up issues not in the plan that it was interested in dealing with and discussing. The plan has also been vetted through WSSC Water and the Planning Board, and their comments are also included in the packet and were taken into account in a number of revisions that the staff and councilman and the T&E committee have supported. So with that, I'm just going to sort of go through the major issues that the committee took up. I see we have Mr. Hucker here. I didn't know if you wanted to start with any introductory comments or just keep going.
I think you're doing great. Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Levchenko. Sorry I was delayed.
First, I did want to note, and we did have a discussion of racial equity and social justice considerations. As you know, this is a lens that we're applying to more and more issues that come before the council, whether it's legislation, budget, et cetera. And I noted in the committee's discussion that we're simultaneously going through a Thrive Montgomery review. So that's sort of the big picture land use review that the council's taken up. And that had a significant racial equity and social justice review to it. That and succeeding master plans as they proceed will inform the 10-year water and sewer plan. We'll have to be cognizant of the issues raised in those master plans and how they would have to be dealt with as they flow into the 10-year water and sewer plan. The other thing I wanted to mention is the committee did receive a briefing from a bi-county work group looking at extension financing issues in areas of both Montgomery and Prince George's County that are intended to be served by sewer but are not at this time, and primarily because of affordability. It's just incredibly expensive for these areas that if they're not served by now, the likely reason is that there's an affordability issue. And as part of that discussion, in looking at some of the solutions to that, which both councils will be taking up in the future, is how to prioritize areas that would need these extensions and possibly some kind of subsidy of service. And that's where we might find an opportune time to do a racial equity and social justice lens, is in the development of those sub-districts and the areas that would move forward in a priority manner. So that's something that we'll be working on down the line. It's not something ready for discussion or action today, but I just wanted to let the council know about that. Now, to the major issues in the plan, and I will try to mention issues that were identified and recommended by the executive and the committee's response to that, as well as items raised directly by the committee and not directly addressed in the what we came over from the executive. And as I noted on the first couple pages of the packet, the two main policy issues that were looked at, one is an existing policy. It's called our abutting mains policy, where properties that already abut a main have eligibility to be connected. The executive had recommended a revision to that plan that would allow main extensions, not just connecting to the main, but main extensions under limited circumstances. And this was in response to some category change requests that the council had deferred last year. And the committee was comfortable with that approach and the limited circumstances for that. It did recommend some additional language, tightening up what properties would be eligible for those main extensions, limiting it to improved properties or recorded building lots, so that the extensions don't inadvertently create more development than would otherwise necessarily occur. But the main extensions provide some additional flexibility to applicants to better align the extension or the on-site extension to their property. So the committee was comfortable with that with the additional language. The other item that the committee added, also based on a deferred request last year, was the ability for properties under some circumstances to transfer abutting mains rights. A property that I mentioned earlier that is eligible may be sitting next to another property that is not eligible. And if they're under the same ownership, they both abut the main, and some other conditions that we've identified. Under certain circumstances, the property owner can transfer the rights from one property to another. And one main concern that we feel we've addressed in this language is the donating property needs to have a fully functioning septic system as documented by permitting services, so that we don't run into a situation where in the short run that property would need service to deal with a public health problem in the short term at least, so that we don't end up with two connections to sewer where one was intended. So we hope that deals with that issue, certainly in the short run and hopefully in the long run as well. So those are the significant changes to the abutting mains policy that the committee agreed with. I didn't know if there were any questions that council members had, or if committee members wanted to add any more to that discussion before we move on to the next item that was brought up. All right, the next item is once again in response to some deferred requests. The committee had asked the executive and council staff to work to develop a special policy for the extension of sewer to commercial properties outside the planned sewer envelope. The council deferred a couple of requests last year, TransQuest and Travilla Oak LLC. The council may recall these from last year, which did not have a policy justification for extending service, but the planning board as well as the council were supportive of the redevelopment efforts for both of these properties and asked staff to consider a policy that would allow for properties like these to move forward. So staff did develop a policy working closely with executive staff. We do not have a recommendation from the executive on this, however. I want to be clear. This is a staff-generated policy and a committee-recommended policy. But under this policy, which shares a lot of a commonality with the private institutional facilities policy, which is a longstanding policy in the plan that allows institutional uses under certain circumstances to connect. where they otherwise would be ineligible. This provides a similar policy framework for commercial properties, with some exceptions and differences that are needed to distinguish these. But this policy was unanimously recommended by the committee and is reflected in the draft language that's included in the packet. And I didn't know if any council members wanted to provide any further comments on this or have any questions.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Really appreciate your work on this. I think we've found a path here that is contained and appropriate and will allow for a very common sense improvement in these properties. And you know, this little strip center is in a location where otherwise you have to drive pretty far to get to some quality amenities. And I think it's going to enable that center to modernize and just support the quality of life for the surrounding area. And I think it's really going to be a big improvement. And you know, the concept plans I've seen for the old White House are very interesting. I think it's really going to be a high quality gathering spot for this part of the county. And I think we've hit on a great solution that is carefully constructed and will allow for some terrific progress without creating precedents that we don't really envision and don't want to entertain. So I'm really pleased to see it happening, and I appreciate the property owner's long patience in putting it forward, and hope that we'll be able to see them take it to the successful completion. There's still a lot of work here. I mean, no doubt, this is a big project. They're going to be running an extension for quite a distance, but hopefully it will all come together. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate everything that was just said. I just want to thank the members of the T&E committee for their work on this, and thank staff. I'm pleased with the result here. I think that it will allow projects to move forward that will be a significant benefit to the community, but in a way that mitigates unintended consequences of what are very sensitive issues that have been handled as such. So I just want to express my appreciation for the work. I know it's been a long time coming. Appreciate everybody's patience and diligence, and look forward to moving this forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Levchenko.
And I did want to note that those requests, as well as some of the other deferred requests that I mentioned earlier, are scheduled to come back to the council a week from today. So you'll be hearing some of the same things we talked about today, only more specifically to those cases next week.
Got it.
Yeah, today is the policy. Next week would be the conditional approval of those related category change requests. They would be conditioned on approval of the 10-year plan, both by the full council, but also by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and also some other conditions that we'll go through next week.
Great.
Some of the other issues discussed, and it's a comprehensive update, so we're not getting into the weeds today. There's a lot of detail in the packet, but I did just want to highlight a few of the items that did come up in committee, and just note some of those big picture items. The Potomac Peripheral Sewer Policy. That's a policy that specific to the Potomac subregion allows properties that are adjacent or confronting the sewer envelope under certain circumstances to connect. Some issues have come up in the last couple of years, and the executive did recommend some language affirming the current practice that the policy does not apply to properties that confront the planned sewer service envelope within the Rockville service area. This peripheral sewer policy is intended to deal with the county sewer service envelope, not the Rockville envelope. So that language, that clarifying language, is in the plan, and the T&E committee had concurred with that. The committee also has recommended further study by DEP and WSSC Water regarding capacity issues associated with a current restriction in the peripheral sewer policy having to do with the Palatine low pressure sewer. So that capacity issue will be reviewed by DEP, WSSC Water, and depending on where that goes, we may revisit that policy there. Another issue that came up in some of the public hearing testimony had to do with Glen Hills, some longstanding sewer issues there. This council took comprehensive action on Glen Hills about 6 years ago to modify some of the restrictions. Basically, the master plan had included a stricter policy about properties that were eligible for service there compared to similar properties elsewhere in the county. For the most part, what the council did was eliminate those differences. It did a comprehensive review of service in the area and septic issues, and identified some long-term concerns going forward. And the council ultimately recommended removing some of the restrictions in that area. However, further loosening of requirements for extension of sewer for that area was left, per the council's direction, to a future potential limited master plan amendment that would be done for that area. And to date, that has not been scheduled. It's not on the planning board's work plan for review, but that is, staff believes that is the appropriate place to deal with these even broader issues of area-wide sewer concerns in Glen Hills. So that issue was discussed by the committee. I had mentioned earlier the underserved neighborhood bi-county report regarding main extensions. So there's some language in the plan that will be updated based on the most recent developments with that. More to come with that in terms of how the sub-districts that would be involved here would be created, how the subsidies would work for those sub-districts. State legislation is needed in order to provide some of the financing from WSSC Water. Both counties would also be contributing to that, and that would have to be discussed as well. So a lot more to come with that, but we did update the language in the plan. Some other issues, just briefly, regional water supply and raw water storage. WSSC Water provided some updated text there. There's a lot of activity going on in the region and seeking federal support for additional planning work for off-site, off-river water storage. So that's a major regional issue, and we expect more to come with that in the coming months and years. But we did want to update that language to be to capture the latest work going on there. Also, the council has before it Bill 4021, septic system ownership requirements. One of the major elements in that is that septic system owners would be required to pump out their systems every 5 years. The council's taking that up this month, or the committee is, and the plan recognizes that legislation, but because we don't have a resolution to that yet, we don't have any firm language in terms of requirements for the 10-year plan. But when that bill is passed, we will need to reconsider what, if any, changes need to be made in the 10-year plan related to that. Also, I mentioned the private institutional facilities policy earlier. This policy has been gone through major changes over a number of years as the council has tried to balance some of the interests here in terms of providing opportunities for nonprofit institutions to locate facilities and provide services that are supported by the county or often supplements of what the county does, while also recognizing land use and neighborhood concerns, et cetera. So many renditions of major policy changes have occurred with that, with some controversy over the years. However, this year's plan, the changes are more clarifying in nature and more technical. So we don't have the same kinds of major policy issues this year with the PIF policy as we've had in the past, but there are some updates with that. Another issue, there's a specific policy called the Riverwood Drive Restricted Sewer Service Area, and the executive had recommended updating the restrictions to reflect properties that have already been served by sewer or properties that are not feasible to be served. Staff had recommended some modification to the areas that would be removed from the restriction, and Executive staff were comfortable with that, as was the committee, so we made some adjustments to what the executive had recommended. There's numerous other recommendations that I've mentioned that I don't think need to be fully discussed here, but are in the packet. In terms of next steps, we'll prepare a resolution for final action based on today's straw votes for action by the council next week. Then there's a comment period for the executive. Then it is transmitted to the Maryland Department of the Environment for its review and final action. And as I mentioned, there's some companion category change requests that will be taken up next week, and those would also be submitted to the Maryland Department of the Environment in conjunction with the 10-year plan update for their review. So that's all I have. We do have executive staff here to answer questions as well if there's any other questions or concerns the council would like to take up.
I don't see any other questions or concerns from staff. I'll just acknowledge that I know a lot of work went into this document, and there's been a lot of heavy lifting. I want to thank the committee for their leadership on this, and because you all did such a great job, I don't think that there's much left for us to pick over here. So I believe, do we need to take a straw vote now, Mr. Levchenko?
Yeah, it'd be helpful to just have a straw vote that you're comfortable with the recommendations as reflected in the packet, and we'll prepare a final resolution for consent action next week.
And I believe that's without objection, that we agree with the recommendations in the packet and of the committee. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, that didn't take as long as we had anticipated, and so we have interviews for the Merit System Protection Board, but I don't believe the interviewees are here. Is that correct? Or are they, Ms. Michelson? Okay. So why don't we take a recess until 10:30, and we will come back to those interviews then. Thank you. Yeah. All right, can we get a countdown?
Good morning. We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, thank you, everyone. We resume our council session this morning with interviews for our Merit System Protection Board. I want to thank Ms. Chittis and Ms. Koppel for your willingness to serve this morning. The way this will work is I will ask each of you a question. There are 7 questions in all. We will do this in alphabetical order. And then after the 7 questions are asked, my colleagues will then have an opportunity to ask you a question as well, or follow up to an answer you may have given in your initial response. And as my colleagues know, we must ask questions of each of the members of the respective folks before us. And so just so everyone's aware. So thank you again so much for joining us this morning. Please explain your understanding of the purpose of the Merit System Protection Board and the role of a board member. And if you can limit your responses to somewhere between 1 and 2 minutes, that'd be helpful to keep us moving forward. And we'll start with Ms. Chillis.
Good morning.
Oh, you want to press the button right by the microphone. There you go.
Good morning. My last name is Childs.
Childs, thank you.
Yes, thank you. The purpose of the Merit System Protection Board and the role of the board member. The duties really are to protect the county and to protect employees of Montgomery County. So if an employee is demoted, suspended, or terminated, they have a right to an appeal, and the appeal is made to the board, who hears the arguments, pro and con, and makes a deliberation. So I think that concisely expresses the role of the board and the board member.
Thank you, Ms. Childs. Ms. Koppel,
I will just piggyback on what
you want to hit the button right by the microphone. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I will not repeat what Dr. Childs has said in her succinct description, but I would add that the Merit System Protection Board protects most, but not all, county employees. There's some exemptions in front of me, for example. And there is a, Dr. Childs has described the adjudicatory function and the 3 types of appeals, which would be disciplinary and termination, denial of employment, and decisions on grievances. And we are to carry out, the board members are to carry out these duties in an unbiased manner, not favoring the employer or the employee. There are also non-adjudicatory functions. For example, every 5 years there's an audit of the compensation and job classification standards. I understand an audit is going to be taking place this year, and from that we can learn information on whether pay and high-level jobs are being given on an equitable basis. There are also other studies that the board conducts, and sometimes at the request of the council.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Koppel, this next question you will start with. What is your experience in the field of personnel management, including experience with merit systems, collective bargaining systems, or other types of government-regulated personnel systems? Please indicate any other experience you may have relating to the duties and responsibilities of the Merit System Protection Board.
I have 38 years of experience with merit systems, personnel systems, and labor management systems, and this is working for 30 years in the federal government in 3 federal agencies, including 2, the U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board and the Federal Labor Relations Authority, which combined perform many of the functions of this board. I served in those agencies as an employee, a team lead, a supervisor, and a member of the senior executive service. This past 8 years after I retired from federal service, I have worked as a private sector attorney representing mostly federal employees and applicants for federal employment. Those employees being protected by one sort of merit system or another. And in fact, last week, I just completed a 5.5-year term at the U.S. Government Accountability Office's Personnel Appeals Board, which seems to be, in many ways, the federal legislative counterpart of this board. And as chairman of that board over the past year, I feel proudest of being able to reach consensus among the members.
Thank you so much. Dr. Childs, same question.
Yes, thank you. I'm a trained mediator, and I'm active with that organization. I have served 3 years on the Merit System Protection Board, and I'm presently serving as vice chair of the board. I have had over 30 years of teaching law as a career. I have worked actively in the county. I have served as a chaplain of my Delta Sigma Theta organization. And so I think that summarizes my years of experience in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Childs. And we'll start with you with this next question, Dr. Childs. Will you be able to make the time commitment that the board requires?
Absolutely. I have the time to read the documents, analyze the documents, and then when we meet on Zoom to contribute and participate actively. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Koppel?
Yes, I will be. In fact, particularly this year, now that my term at the Government Accountability Office Personnel Appeals Board has ended, this year and for the next 3 years, I will have the time to fully commit to being a member.
Thank you. Ms. Koppel, this first question is for you then. The county charter states no member of the board shall hold political office or participate in any campaign for any political or public office during the member's term of office. Is this a problem for you?
Not at all.
Great. Dr. Childs?
Likewise, not at all, not a problem. Thank you.
And the next question, Dr. Childs, is are you aware that members of the Merit System Protection Board must submit annual public financial disclosure statements?
I am, and all of my statements have been submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Koppel?
I'm also aware, and I've done this during much of my federal career. I also understand the importance of financial disclosure forms, having been the chief ethics officer at a federal agency.
Fabulous. And Ms. Koppel, if appointed, how would you position this role to work on racial equity and social justice issues?
I see an opportunity in the non-adjudicatory functions of membership. One example would be the auditing of job classifications and compensation systems. The 2018 audit found that there was some pay inequities based on race and national origin, which the study found could have been based on the high concentration of certain races in certain low-paying jobs. And one example they gave is bus operators. 72% of them are African-American men and women, whereas only 19% of managers in the county are African-American. And the audit came up with some recommendations. And one opportunity that we would have to advance racial equity is to check to see whether the county carried out these recommendations or what the roadblocks would be. And depending on the findings of next year's audit, they may shed light on the need for other studies as to what are the roadblocks that prevent lower paying people in certain races from advancing. And one example that comes to mind is position descriptions for supervisors. Do they all have to have a college education? And there'll be issues like that the board would have an opportunity to consider. And as for the adjudicatory function, I see opportunities where occasionally, and Dr. Childs may be able to address this, you reach a decision on an individual case. It's on all fours with the law and regulation, but there's something wrong with it. It's not equitable, it doesn't make sense. And that could give the board an opportunity to propose changing the problematic regulation. So I do see many opportunities for advancing racial equity.
Thank you so much. Dr. Childs.
With regard to racial equity and social justice, I think it's important to take a real critical look at the data that we have. What is the age of the data? Times have changed. Language has changed. So I think right now we are faced with examining the issue, and the Merit System Protection Board has developed recommendations which are in circulation for an RFP which will be promulgated in the next year or two. I think, again, looking at the data, who is doing the data analysis? How accurate are the results? Do they reflect our community? I think these are very important pieces to analyze and not make emotional decisions, so that there is a substantive root in whatever we decide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Childs. And Dr. Childs, this last question for me will be for you first, and then I've got Councilmember Jawando in the queue after this question is answered. First, is there any actual or potential conflict of interest or anything else in your background of which the council should be aware? If you are in a profession that serves clients, what types of clients do you serve?
I am not in a profession that, quote, serves clients. My duties on the board, as I expressed earlier, and serving as second term proposed and vice chair, no, I do not believe that there are any complications or conflicts.
Thank you, Dr. Childs. Ms. Koppel?
I do not see any conflicts either. I do work in a law firm. I represent clients with labor and employment disputes, but these clients are mostly federal employees or federal applicants for employment. Our firm does not represent any county employees, nor do we have any plans to do so.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn it over to colleagues to ask any questions, and I'll start with Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for reapplying and serving, and thank you for being willing to serve and continuing your service in another way.
Thank you.
I don't know, I'm sure I speak for my colleagues. We are lucky to have such qualified and competent applicants. Can we just clone you for every board we have? I think we'd be very happy.
We can arrange that.
Some ethical considerations there. But, I do have one question from your various vantage points. Let's start with you, Ms. Childs. You served on the board and you're applying for reappointment. How do you think that the board has room? Is there room for improvement? Are there processes or things that you haven't yet accomplished that you think we could change or should change, or that you should change if reappointed, that the board could do better? And I guess the same question to you would be from the perspective of what you perceive the board to have done in your prior experience. But we'll start with you, Ms. Child.
I think it would be helpful if we met in person. Not advocating that, but I think there is a joie de vivre that is conveyed when you have that in-person discussion, and you can share your differences and sort of argue about it over coffee, if you will. I think there may be a lack of empowerment on a certain level of employees that I discern. Again, need the data to analyze, need the data, can't go by my sense. And so that is my one area of hoping to improve, as you asked.
When you say lack of empowerment of employees coming to you, could you explain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think for me, the business of honesty and integrity is very important. And as I shared with my colleagues, when I put my head on the pillow at night, I must go to sleep. So those decisions are very dear to me, and I feel for the community when they're not empowered.
Yeah. Thank you.
Not having worked on the board, I don't have the inside story. My perspective is based primarily on the website and the decisions and the studies that were there. I'm thinking that just from the annual reports, I think there should be somewhat more emphasis on the non-adjudicatory functions, because those are very important. The changing of regulations, for example, and I don't know if those activities are not done, but they are not. I don't think they're given their due in the reports, and I think people would want to. I think the public would want to see more of what we do other than issue decisions. The other thing, and this is just an idea. I don't know. Perhaps it may have been researched already, but I know some of the courts have lists of attorneys, say retired attorneys, who would have time to take on cases pro bono or at a low rate. And I just know how complicated labor and employment law can be, and it can be very difficult for a pro se. So it would be good, perhaps, if there would be a list of representatives or attorneys who could help them out going through the challenges of employment law.
I appreciate that. That's kind of the other side of the coin of empowerment and having places for people to go and feel heard and get their issues dealt with. So, all right, thank you. Those are both very helpful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I don't see any other questions. Oh, Councilmember Navarro, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you so much for applying. And Ms. Childs, thank you so much for your service thus far. I wanted to follow up a little bit on the comment that you made, Dr. Childs, in terms of the empowerment piece. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Are there particular ideas that have come to mind? Obviously, you did say that data analysis is going to be important because this is your sense, but are there particular elements that you think would enhance that sense of empowerment for particular communities, particular employees?
Well, I think that presentations to organizations that advocate, whether for the Latino community or for the African American community, to advise that there are resources available and that one need not be food insecure because of a job demotion or some sanction that may impact salary and living. I mean, there are just the residual effect. It's like the deck of cards. First this happens, then that, then the other. So I think it's important to address that, not just from singularly the demotion, the termination, the promotion, or the demotion, or the termination, but to encompass the pain, the disenfranchisement.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your willingness to serve. I think Councilmember Jawando said it well. We are very fortunate to have such very qualified candidates. So we will be following up, and we thank you very much for your willingness.
Thank you so much.
All right, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is legislative session day number 29, introduction of bills. This is an introduction of Bill 2822, Common Ownership Communities, Duties, Requirements, and Procedures. Lead sponsor is myself at the request of the county executive. Mrs. Coney, could you talk a little bit about this bill?
Yes, good morning, council members, and thank you, Mr. President. This is Bill 2822. It's a bill to amend provisions regarding common ownership communities. It's Chapter 10B and the sequence of provisions around section of Chapter 10B of the Code. So in the memo that is included in the packet, I just want to walk through just the salient points that are being addressed. This is a bill from the executive. It was based on recommendations from the Common Ownership Communities Commission. And they think that, as outlined in the let's see, as outlined in the accompanying executive's memo, this is supposed to enhance governance of common ownership communities, including training requirements, voting requirements, registration processes, and the dispute resolution provisions. So I'll just walk through the various things that the bill hopes to accomplish. With regard to requiring periodic retraining, at Circle 2 to 3, there are some updates that where the board is going to be providing periodic training, not only to new members. There's already a provision in there that new members should have training. New members of common ownership communities should have training within 90 days of taking office, but these are being enhanced to make sure that there's retraining for existing members after 3 years. At Circle 3 to 4, so those are at Circle 3 to 4. And then the other thing being accomplished here is clarifying registration, voting, and dispute resolution provisions. So I would refer you to Circle 10. Just by way of example, one of the provisions now is they're trying to enhance the integrity of their voting system. So when you have absentee votes, those should be kept in a sealed container and only opened at the meeting. There are other clarifications as well addressing electronic voting. A third item being addressed is the circumstances under which the commission, the county's commission, the county's commission on common ownership communities can accept jurisdiction on dispute resolution processes. So there's a very elaborate process in Section 10B that addresses dispute resolution. Common ownership communities are encouraged to pursue good faith efforts within their governing documents. So they really should be coming to the county as a last resort. But the commission does exist as an avenue for dispute resolution. There's some clarifications being presented here about the circumstances under which the commission will accept jurisdiction. It's purely within the commission's discretion. And the decision by the commission to either accept or reject jurisdiction is not something that's subject to judicial challenge. So it's purely in the discretion of the commission. Now the parties can then go to court and present their grievance with regard to whatever the dispute is, but the decision of the commission, whether to accept jurisdiction or not, is not something that should be subject to litigation. Another provision I just wanted to highlight is, I think I've run through them all, so unless there are specific questions, I think those are the salient points that are being addressed in this bill.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ciccone. Public hearing will be scheduled at a later date, but that gives us a very nice overview of this bill. And so that bill is now officially introduced. Now we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is an interview for the county attorney position. I want to welcome Chief Administrative Officer Rich Madalino and Mr. Markoffs. This is just full disclosure, a full circle moment for me. I was on the interview panel in 2012 when Mr. Markoffs first interviewed for the deputy position in the council attorney's office, and that then I was impressed and have been even more impressed by his dedication these last 10 years plus. And thank you, sir, for ably serving in an acting capacity. You've done an outstanding job, so we really appreciate those efforts. And Mr. Madalino, I'll turn it over to you to make some introductory comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, council members. I don't know if someone sneezes on it, it must be true, right? Is that what?
Yeah.
So I thank you all very much for entertaining this nominee. County Executive Elrich wanted me to come over and explain why Mr. Markoffs is the right person to be the county attorney right now. First, I wanted to just let everyone know that obviously, there are some positions of critical importance for county government that the executive believes, and hopefully you all agree, that we need to move forward with filling those positions now and not waiting to the next term, especially when you've had a critical position like this, the county attorney, that's been vacant since February. So you'll have a handful of nominees on a variety of positions that we want to make sure are in place because they will help with speedy transition to the next term, to your new colleagues or successors, depending upon your situation. So that's why we have Mr. Markoffs before you today at the end of the term. So I just wanted to make sure the people and you all understood and the public understood why we were moving forward with this nomination at this moment. Because I hope you agree the county attorney plays a critical role for the functioning of the county government. Mr. Markoffs has been an attorney for 32 years. He is actually a member of the bar in Maryland, Virginia, D.C., and Pennsylvania. He has been with the county government for almost 16 years, 10 of those years serving as the deputy county attorney, as you heard the council president talk about. He has, in that role, been the key representative for the county government in a series of our highest profile, most controversial, or most consequential cases, whether it's negotiating around Viva White Oak to the Smart Growth Initiative, to being the liaison between the county attorney's office with the federal government and the state government over the Peter Bang embezzlement issue. He has been a key player in representing the interests of the people and the county government for years, which is why one of the many reasons why the county executive has put his name forward. As the deputy county attorney, he has overseen the entire operation, the budget, and all the attorneys. He has, during that time, recruited and hired dozens of employees to the point where if you look at the makeup of the office right now, 60% of the county attorney's office is now actually women. And he is proud to say that it's potentially one of the few county agencies that has achieved full pay equity across the board for all employees under his leadership and prodding. He is also, while his style might be different than the previous county attorney or the prior county attorney that I had the honor to work with, Chuck Thompson, during my prior service with the county, he certainly has the same dedication and devotion to the county government that we have seen through multiple county attorneys. And I think because of his role as the deputy county attorney, he understands the unique position that the charter places our county attorney in as the advisor, the legal advisor to the county executive, and an advisor to all of you. He has been blunt and clear in his assessment to myself, to other leaders in the county government and the county executive about what our legal position should be, what our exposures are. The county executive has valued that information and advice, and I think he is worthy of continuing in this role, as does the county executive, as the permanent county attorney, and potentially serving this county executive and county executives to come, depending upon the question of the referendum. So with that, Mr. President, I would request humbly that all of you support this nomination for this outstanding Montgomery County public servant, John Markoffs, to be our next county attorney.
Thank you so much, Mr. Madaleno. And I'll note, just for our public at large, that this is a unique appointment in that this is the only county executive appointee that does formally serve both the council and the county executive. And it is a unique role and an important one. So, Mr. Markoffs, I've got 7 questions for you. Ask that you limit your responses to around 2 minutes to give my colleagues some time at the end to ask questions themselves. So the first question is, how has your experience prepared you for the role of county attorney?
So as Rich Madaleno said, it's a real privilege and honor to be in front of you today seeking confirmation as county attorney. I've had about 32 years of practice both in state and federal courts as a seasoned trial lawyer, but also I bring a perspective, having worked in the private sector for about almost 18 years, 17, 18 years, of being very customer service oriented. And I think you've seen that over the last year as acting county attorney, that my view is that the county attorney's position and lawyers in that office are to serve and not to be a barrier to the implementation of policy and laws, but to call balls and strikes and to be in a situation where we're giving sound legal advice to the council and to the county executive. That said, I think it's fair to say for at least a few minutes talk a little bit about the experience. So when I came into the office in 2007, I was appointed to DPWT's representation, handling all of our construction projects, litigation related to it. Then during that same time frame, I was assigned as the special player in the office to handle really ugly cases. Some of you might remember we got sued for $100 million in the Republic Properties case. That was the developer that was originally selected as interim developer out of White Oak. The county executive, Leggett, did not go forward with that, and we ended up in major litigation. Leon Rodriguez was the county attorney at the time. I was appointed to handle that case. During that time, I handled all kinds of negotiations and litigation that was very ugly or high profile. Litigation with the Archdiocese, other very controversial projects. When I became deputy in 2012, I think both Mark Hansen and Leon Rodriguez, Mark was the deputy, had recognized that I had a special role in the office. And at that point in time, I became responsible for the $10 million plus budget. I know it reflects a smaller amount in the budget for just the office, but we have chargebacks and the self-insurance fund. So actually the county attorney's working budget is about $10 million with 52 lawyers and 28 positions, actually not 26, but 28 positions. We have a couple of vacancies that I supervise. And of that, 6 division chiefs, an IT specialist, a lawyer dedicated for ESI, and MPIA requests of large magnitude. During all of that time, again, I was handling some really ugly cases. I helped solve the problem up in Clarksburg. You'll remember we had setback requirements and problems with that. I had negotiated the deal with Newlands to close out all the permits and finish the development in Clarksburg. And of course, we also had the problem with the COO of DED stealing $7.5 million, and I headed up the investigation. I'll talk a little bit later about my role with the Inspector General on that. So, lastly, I think I've served this council, the county executive, well. I tell you what you need to hear, not what you necessarily always want to hear. And I think that's the role of the county attorney. And I think that for certain this past year and even the 10 years as deputy has been trial by fire. And you've seen firsthand with my reports to council, I increased the communication, which I'll also address later in my comments, with county council. I think that's very important. So I think that's reflective ultimately as how I would act as county attorney the last 10 years and certainly the last year as acting.
Thank you so much. What are your priorities for the office of the county attorney, and how will you implement those priorities?
So I have three priorities I'd like to share with you this morning. First one, and I've already alluded to it, is maintain a high level of communication with the County Council. And early communication. I think that's one of the things that we need to implement, is that in terms of legislation, that we have this mutual dialogue, which frankly, I think maybe 16 years ago or before that, we had that. We had a lawyer from the county attorney's office coming over and sitting at council to participate if necessary. We need to increase our communication. And I've made an effort this year of sending over just about whenever anything happens in a court case or anything controversial, I'm notifying council, just like I would notify the county executive. So that's my number one priority, if you will. The second priority is I want to ensure the county attorney's office continues to remain and retain exceptional lawyers and hire exceptional lawyers and staff. And I want to give a shout out to the office because, probably unknown to council, because you only dealt with a few of my division chiefs and others in the office during COVID, there were an enormous number of people working in the background to keep the office working at 100%. We pivoted immediately. I instituted a process of having laptops for everybody years ago. So when COVID hit and we were required to vacate the executive office building, we were immediately up and running on Teams and on G5 licenses. So we were fully operational. I do want to give a shout out to some of the division chiefs you don't know. I know that you've worked with Sylvia Kinch, sitting as the Board of Health. She did an exceptional job. Ed Latner on government operations. But I want you to, and Trevor Ashbury also with the HERB funds and other things. Patty Kane is our division chief for litigation, represents and deals with the self-insurance fund. She's done an outstanding job. And Corey Talcott is in charge of our division of health and human services. And so child abuse never stopped during COVID. And we had lots of cases for termination of parental rights, children in need of assistance. And so that division, led by Corey, did an outstanding job during that crisis. And also, Cliff Royalty in the Division of Zoning, Land Use, and Economic Development continued to keep working on all of the deals that the county executive and the council were interested in. So, again, a really great opportunity in our office for people to come. We have a few vacancies. I'm going to give a shout out for our vacancies. Apply to the county attorney's office. We also have 28 outstanding support staff who were in the office 60% of the time. We did not completely evacuate. We couldn't, because we had to have people in the office working the cases. And so I want to give a shout out to the support staff. And we already alluded to the pay equity. Mark Hansen and I, 10 years ago, made a concerted effort during those 10 years to achieve pay equity in the office. And it turns out that we are at 61% women to men in the office. And the pay equity at all levels of the county attorney position have been achieved. The MLS people are paid the same. Attorney 3 and Attorney 2s are paid the same. We don't have any Attorney 1s. That pay band is too low for me to recruit at. So that's my second. Third priority, and very important, is to support the priorities of county council and support the priorities of the county executive. For example, our supporting efforts would include the racial equity and social justice programs and laws, work on housing and development for the county, climate change and protecting the environment. And just a few examples of the things that the council has been involved in with me and the office is we have the Monsanto National Class Action, where we're going to get $4.3 million out of the PCB litigation. We can apply for more funds. We've protected the watersheds at 10 Mile Creek and Patuxent Creek watersheds and lawsuits dealing with either a regulatory taking or a RLUIPA case. And we're contemplating fossil fuel lawsuits and looking at the forever chemical lawsuits, PFAS. So again, my third priority would be to support the priorities of council and the county executive.
Thank you so much. Third question is, what is your understanding of the role of the county attorney as it relates to the council and as it relates to the inspector general?
Okay, so that's a double down question, like in deposition style. I got to break it down. So the first question, role of the county attorney is set forth in Charter 213. Section 213 provides that the county attorney serves as the chief legal officer for county government. And the county attorney represents the county in all cases in the county, where the county rather is a party. There's two distinctions to one, and Rich Madaleno had pointed to it. County attorney acts as the legal advisor for the executive and as a legal advisor to the county council. I think there's two roles that the county attorney fits. One is first zealously representing council in litigation, which we've done in the 10 Mile Creek and the Patuxent watershed cases. That was the water sewer category changes. And second, the county attorney must provide the council with legal advice so you can make an informed decision, and that requires us to maintain in the county attorney's office excellent communication with council and timely communication, so that at the same time the county exec and the council, they all know about things at the same time to work as one government. And most importantly, the county attorney must respect the role of policymakers. I think that's a really important thing for the county attorney and its lawyers to function and do, not to use legal advice to interfere with policy decisions.
Thank you.
And let me
yes,
address the second question.
Yeah.
Second question is, Inspector General is set in the scope of duties is in 2-151 of the code. County attorney assists the Inspector General in the investigations. It also is the legal counsel to the Inspector General, and if the Inspector General wants to get special counsel, County Attorney's Office assists in getting special counsel that would not be under the control of the County Attorney, as long as the County Council does an appropriation to cover those fees. And perfect example of the working relationship our office has had was the Peter Bank theft, in which Ed Blansett, the former IG, and the county attorney's office, I hired a forensic accounting firm to review $40 million of transactions over a 10-year period where Peter Bang was the COO, and shared that information and worked with the IG to uncover that investigation, which eventually led, of course, to the conviction in state and federal court of Mr. Bang.
Thank you. So generally, what is the county attorney's obligation to represent both the council and executive, especially when they may disagree on an issue?
That is a possibility, isn't it? So under Charter 213, the county attorney has an obligation to provide legal advice to both council and the county executive, even if the two branches of government don't agree on an issue. And under the Charter and the Maryland Attorney's Rules of Professional Conduct, and I read that verbatim because the name has changed over the last few years. It used to be known as the Model Rules for the lawyers among us. Under the Maryland Attorney's Rules of Professional Conduct and the Charter, the county attorney's got to provide the same advice on a particular issue to both the council and the county executive. And I believe council and the executive must timely receive that legal advice. Timely in that I think it should be concomitant, that you should all be working from the same advice at one time. And if there's a disagreement on the legal issue between council and executive, I believe it's my role to work through that, to work with both the council and the executive to find an acceptable resolution or solution to that particular legal issue. And at the end of the day, it's my belief that we're one government and that we should work that way. So that would be the way I would approach that disagreement if there was one.
Thank you. Next question is, under the county charter, can the county executive decide which county laws he or she won't implement? And do you have an obligation on behalf of the council to advise the executive that he or she implement legislation passed by the council?
So again, another compound question. So in deposition style, we've got to take it apart. I'll answer both questions. Answer to the first question is no. The county executive cannot decide which county laws he will or won't implement. Answer to the second question is yes. The county attorney has an obligation to advise the executive that he must implement legislation passed by council. And under the charter, the county executive is obligated to implement the validly enacted laws of the county council. And Charter Section 201 requires the county executive that he's vested in and shall faithfully execute the laws, I'm paraphrasing. The only exception I see to that situation is where council were to pass an unconstitutional or invalid law. And at that point, we would have to evaluate it, I think, from the perspective of that it would have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. I will give proper deference to the council in the legislative process, and the county attorney should adopt the highest standard of review in that situation, beyond a reasonable doubt, before determining enacted legislation is invalid. And in my view, that only in that extreme situation where the county attorney determined that legislation is unconstitutional beyond a reasonable doubt, would the county executive, I would believe, entitled not to implement a law enacted by council. So it'd have to be essentially facially unconstitutional or invalid. Otherwise, I believe the county executive should be implementing that law. And I guess in the unlikely event, playing chess board on that, in the unlikely event that that could not be convinced of the county attorney or county executive to do that, then I would assist the council in hiring special counsel in that event to seek judicial review of that decision.
Thank you. 2 more questions. If appointed, how would you position this role to work on racial equity and social justice issues?
So as you know, the county attorney's office is an internal serving department. We're there to serve all of the county government in any fashion. OCA will continue to support council and the county executive in their efforts to address racial equity and social issues. Right now, we're continuing to support and will support Director Tiffany Ward in her Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. For example, we worked on the regulations recently and helped with those. I think our primary role in the county attorney's office is to support council, county executive, and Ms. Ward in implementing racial equity and social justice laws and programs so that they withstand judicial scrutiny. It's our job, and this is why I was focused on earlier, that if we had early involvement, we can work through the issues of constitutionality of various programs, which I think is what our role is in the county attorney's office. I'll give you an example of our current efforts on that to show you how our role, I think, will continue. I'm working with the Office of Procurement right now on the disparity study that supports the continuation of the county's Minority Female Disabled Program, the MFD. That report will be completed next year, and I anticipate working on revisions and amendments that are suggested by the study to improve that law and the program. Further, working with the Office of Procurement to simplify processes and remove barriers to participation in the county purchasing system to have it be more racially equitable. Also, working with DHCA to make it easier for the county to acquire and develop multifamily housing to meet the needs of the county. So those are just a few of the ways I think that the examples is how the county attorney and how that role would be to promote racial equity and social justice.
Thank you for that. Final question for me for now is, are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
There are no conflicts of interest which the council should be aware.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando, and any other colleagues that have a question, just let me know.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Markoff. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I feel like I have to ask a question, but no, I actually have one. It follows off of question 5, which is, I think, a really important question, and I agree with you. We are one county government, and this shouldn't happen, but we live in a world where things happen that shouldn't happen all the time, and meaning this council, this branch of government, passes a law and sets a time certain that that law should be implemented, and sometimes for various reasons, some innocuous, maybe others not, it doesn't happen. Timelines are missed, people get sick, who knows what the reasons are, but it happens. And you made very clear, I think appropriately, that your job would be, and your office's job would be, to make sure that duly passed laws are implemented, correct?
Correct.
Is there anyone assigned in your office right now to track or monitor whether the laws passed by this council are implemented in the time and fashion in which they are supposed to be under the law?
I think we are monitoring what council passes and what ultimately comes over for signature by the county executive, and we pay attention whether or not there's a veto and then an override, and we look for the enacted law. Our government operations people are handling that. That would be Ed Latner's division, keeping track. Are we specifically checking to see whether or not a law has been implemented? No.
Okay.
We are not.
I would suggest as you start your term, certainly we can work with you on this, but I think that would be important. We've got a lot going on. We're a big county. There are various timelines and dates. Obviously, the specific agencies are the primary, right? Who's ever the implementing agency or department head or ACAO, or they should be doing this as well. But I do think there is a balls and strikes function, a kind of a check that your office should play in service to us and into the county government to make sure and at least monitor in some way that things are being kept up to speed. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I agree with that. I mean, right now we're in charge of putting together the code. We keep track when the laws come over. We make sure that our outside vendor that posts the county code gets the laws. But you're right, the ones that have not yet been fully implemented is a different issue, and I need to chase that down.
All right, I appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you and not ascribing intent in any way. I just think we need to, that's a check we need to have, because last thing we want is to have to be in a position to do what you said at the end of your answer to this question, which would be assist us in seeking special counsel to implement a law that we've passed. And that would not be good for the county, not be good for the government. And I think this could be a way to, among many other ways that Mr. Madaleno could help with as far as his staff and all the people that work for him, to making sure that we don't get to that point.
Understood.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. I've got Councilmember Rice, followed by Councilmember Friedson, and then Council Vice President Glass. Councilmember Rice.
Well, Mr. Markovs, I just want to thank you for your years of service to this county and to this council, and including myself as a council member. You've always been incredibly responsive, collaborative. It's always worked incredibly well, and I really appreciate your vision and your advice that you've given us multiple times that have kept us out of trouble when it comes to the taxpayers, and I really appreciate that. I did want to ask a question because as we see the landscape changing when it comes to our judiciary, and it is one that's very interesting because everybody always talks about judiciary being balls and strikes, but as we know, it all depends on who the umpire is as to whether or not a ball is truly a ball and a strike is a strike. What do you see as some of the challenges for us as we move forward when it comes to some of the the judicial landscape, when it comes to reproductive rights and other kinds of things that we in this council have been very affirmative of trying to move forward, oftentimes which may be in contrary to what we're seeing at the federal landscape as we're currently seeing when it comes to affirmative action and other kinds of things that are all on the dockets. For our new council members that are coming in and for those that are returning, what do you see as some of those challenges, and how do you think the Office of the County Attorney can help to ensure that Montgomery County continues to be one of those great progressive places that delivers that way of life that we know is so special and important to our residents?
So the quick answer is 2 words: the Supreme Court. I think that's probably our biggest challenge, is what's going to come out of the Supreme Court over the next term. As you know, there is at least one case that presents potential problems depending on how broadly interpreted that case is, and it has to do with the Harvard School admissions program. So we'll see what happens with that. Same thing, I'm not sure of any recent cases that are high enough in the circuits yet to get on this term and maybe next term on reproductive rights. And further case law on gun rights is being massaged pretty fast through the New York system, federal system up in New York rather. So I see the courts as a challenge. I also see, though, an opportunity for the county attorney's office to push and stretch and contemplate the areas of the law. Look, the old adage is, when you have one lawyer in town, you go hungry. You have 2 lawyers in town, you make money. And the reason of that is that lawyers make money and are successful in the areas of gray zone. If it's cut and dry, there's no controversy. And so from my perspective, the county attorney's office is uniquely qualified because we have great lawyers, but we're also in a position where we can work with the council to, I don't want to say push the limits, but certainly stretch the legal analysis necessary to accomplish the goals that we all want. So I see that as probably the true role of the county attorney's office. And I think you've seen evidence of that in the last year or two about my approach on things.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Well, thank you very much. Echo comments of colleagues. Really appreciate all of your service to the county, and in particular, your work as acting county attorney this last year. It really has been refreshing to have your communicative style and your directness. and in particular, your willingness to start from start from a culture of, here's what the public interest is, here's what the goal is, the clear intent is, how do we get creative and think through avenues to allow the county to move forward. And the White Flint property was just one example of that. It had been stalemated for a while. Finally, you had stepped in at my request, I appreciate it, but demonstrated, everybody wanted to get to a place where we were comfortable, and you made that happen. I think you've done that time and again, and I really appreciate it. I know colleagues really appreciate it as well. And it's not always the culture of you go to your lawyer and you have a culture of yes. A lot of times it's you go to your lawyer and you're told no. And here are all the legal reasons why that would be a problem, as opposed to here's the avenue to do it in an appropriate way. So just wanted to note that and appreciate that. I did want to piggyback off of Council Jawando, I say Councilmember and Council Jawando, and his point. I think this is a really key issue and something that I think we ought to work on over the next, several years. But really making sure that the duly enacted laws are implemented with fidelity, and that is not just an execution question; it's a timing question, and I think that has been a challenge at times. And something that it would be helpful to think through more formal administrative mechanisms in order to ensure that that's happening. And I appreciate you talking about that. I think that there are examples. Councilmember Jawando noted when there's a clear date, and that's a little bit cut and dry, right? The executive shall issue method 2 regulations, or by X date. That's easy. I think it gets a little bit tougher when there isn't a date certain, but there's a clear policy directive that is stated, and you can come up with a million reasons why something isn't happening, or why additional conversations need to be had, or additional outreach needs to be had, or meetings need to be had, or negotiations need to be had. But ultimately, the policymaking body of the county has acted. It's an appropriate constitutional law. It needs to be executed, and we need to work together to make sure that happens. So less a question than a comment. I just wanted to note that. I was going to ask a very similar question to Councilmember Jawando, so I just wanted to make sure I note that, and I appreciated your answer, and look forward to you formally continuing in this role, and would be happy to support you.
Mr. President, can I let you know that Mr. Hartman Espada is responsible for sending out an implementation memo to every impacted department following the passage of a bill, and then asking for that department to send back to us a timeline for how they're going to proceed. Maybe we need to let you all know if there is something in a better way, if there is something about the implementation that is unexpected once you have passed a bill. But I think it also goes to what Mr. Markov said earlier too, getting back to that collaboration between the executive branch and the legislative branch about the drafting of bills, and making sure that there are timelines, for example, that are doable, or at least you understand what the pressures are in implementing the timeline that you have laid out in legislation, so you can see whether or not there's need for a change.
Great. Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to associate myself with the comments and questions that my colleagues have asked, and Mr. Markov's. I have appreciated your sage advice and counsel when sought and when provided. And in particular, I have really appreciated your work to strike a balance between the balance of government, between the executive and legislative branches. It's not always easy, but as you noted, it is a unique position that you and your team are in, and I think you have proven yourself capable of doing that. And leading with, I will look forward to supporting you, but I have just a quick question also. As we look forward, I have concerns that society at large is becoming even more litigious, if that is even possible, right? And Montgomery County already has eyes upon us from those who live here and work in DC or live across the country and are mindful of some of the things that we do. I think notably, people are watching us, and those who disagree with some of our progressive policies want to highlight and or make an example of us and sue us. And so as we look towards this upcoming election and elections beyond that, with the backdrop of society and the discord that we see in the news, on social media, and unfortunately in person, share with me your thoughts on navigating us through some of these legal situations as we will continue here with the executive branch doing what we have to do to provide equity and provide resources and make sure everybody here is able to live their lives to their fullest.
So you're absolutely correct. We're in a constant state of warfare. The county gets sued routinely in addendum clause of about almost $1 billion a year.
You speak a little louder.
We get sued for almost about $1 billion a year in the addendum clauses. We pay fractions of that. We fight off every single challenge we get. We were successful, during COVID on the EARP fund litigation, shutting that down and winning at the Fourth Circuit. I anticipate we're going to end up with more litigation. We are a target close to the DC government and the national dialogue. We're active in our political views and in the policies and programs that we want to promote. Whenever you stick your head out, you're a target. And I think we're a constant target. I am concerned about what the Supreme Court may or may not do and how it will be implemented by the U.S. District Court and the Fourth Circuit, especially on reproductive rights. There has been a shift in the judiciary that's worth noting, that when President Obama was in office, he was able to put people on the Fourth Circuit that I think have similar views to how the world should operate. And as a result, the court, and including President Biden, has placed some people on our federal court in Baltimore and in Greenbelt. There's 2 divisions that I think will probably promote and follow through judicially on some of the policies and programs we have. But I think it's a wait and see game and see where the attacks come. The ghost gun legislation got attacked by an organization that's being funded. We've seen attacks by Judicial Watch was the one that came after us during COVID. There are going to be these national organizations that are going to look to us because we end up in some TV programming sometimes at about 6 o'clock at night where there are pundits accusing the county of doing not so good things. And I think we're just going to have to be very careful with that. In terms of what we can do actively with council, though, this goes back to the communication piece, which is that we get right with you immediately when you're proposing legislation so that we can really, working with legislative attorneys, pull the thread on the constitutionality and the chances of success of those programs withstanding judicial scrutiny. So I think that's really important. So I think that's an important consideration going forward, is the communication piece. Again, the court cases are going to come out, and then people are going to try to use them to either upset or promote our policies. And we'll just have to see how they come out.
Well, I appreciate that. And in your response, you equated our legal battles to warfare. And
absolutely.
What we are doing is placing you as general in that courtroom and writing those legal briefs. And you have proven yourself to be up to the task, and look forward to continuing to support you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. Markov, I am going to make some remarks as somebody who is about to leave, but as chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, obviously every year we have to deliberate on the budget for this office, and also, engage in a little bit more of a conversation about how things are going. But also as a council member, I think the longest serving here, have had to be part of a lot of deliberation and a lot of closed session conversations and a lot of litigation. And it's very interesting because I remember as a newly elected council member, we had a particular case regarding abortion rights here in the county. And you would think, right, that after going through, those ups and downs and that roller coaster, et cetera, that perhaps some things would have been settled somewhat, but here we are, all over again. And so, what I just wanted to say, just as a general statement, is that I personally, every time you would walk into that closed session, I would feel like we were ready for war, because your style is such that it's very much straight to the point. And how do we also protect and represent the desires of our voters? It has been alluded to here that Montgomery County is a very special place, and our residents and the voters do expect us to fight hard to protect particular values and to enhance and to make sure that even if we lose sometimes, that we definitely made a point. And so I want to say thank you for the service that you have provided thus far, and I am thrilled that you have been sent over to take over this very important position, because there is no doubt that it's only going to get more complicated. I appreciate you also pointing out the issue of communication. I think that when I joined the council and everything was happening so fast, one of the things that I have to say that I appreciated from the previous administration and also the leadership here on the council staff was that there was a very solid communication flow, right? And so we would get those visits into our offices and say, hey, heads up, this may be happening, here are some issues, et cetera, right? That I think is going to be even more important. And so just like there was a recommendation made in terms of monitoring the legislation, I hope that there's also an opportunity to take a fresh look at this issue of communication, because with an expanded council, with the environment that we are facing, I could only imagine how much more difficult it's going to get. But as I said, I have no doubt that you will be the right person to take this on and to face this sort of new chapter. So anyway, just a comment and just to express my appreciation, and I feel really good that I know that the county council and the county as a whole, the administration, will be in good hands.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just say a couple of things and to sort of wrap things up. I've been impressed at the synergy between you and Ms. Wellens on several cases that have come before this body recently, and I know that synergy and work in collaboration with our council attorney is very important. And we know it will continue, especially as we transition to having a majority new members on this body, which we were all looking forward to. So Mr. Markovs, thank you so much for your willingness to serve, and I don't see any other questions from colleagues. And so with that,
can I say one final thing to quibble with Councilmember Glass?
Sure.
Home to the U.S. Naval Academy, I think we should always refer to someone as an admiral and not a general when we're in the state of Maryland, but just...
Yeah.
I'm originally from New York, so I understand the West Point comment.
I love it. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in, Mr. Markovs. All right. So, colleagues, that takes us to the last item on the agenda before our recess, which is the consent calendar. Can I get a motion to accept the consent calendar? Moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor of the consent calendar, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. So with that, colleagues, we are adjourned until 1 o'clock for a presentation of a proclamation and then 1:30 for public hearings. We are adjourned.
Reaction to that is kind of, bordering on outrage. But, I just want everybody to remember the